Welcome back, everybody, to another great episode of Webinar Wednesday. As Melissa suggested, we have a great guest with us today. We'll be introducing in just a moment. But for now, let's talk a little bit about our topic. What young person among us, what kid in us doesn't absolutely love heavy equipment? Find me a young person, find me someone looking out the door of a car, find me somebody looking at a construction site across the street, and I will show you a young person that loves watching heavy equipment. And I was no different. Growing up, I absolutely loved watching heavy equipment doing work on construction sites, doing work on the roadways, infrastructure, bridges, and so on. So I have this love affair, as many of you do, with the types of equipment that we're going to talk about today. For me, I think it started with the book Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel. It was a book that was written in 1939 about a guy who had a steam shovel named Mary Ann that could do the work of 100 men. Now, I know the picture on your screen isn't a steam shovel. I looked for one on the site that I use for royalty-free images and couldn't find it. But this one is a close enough rendition of what Mary Ann looks like. So for me, it started there. For my son, he had a book all about heavy equipment. It was a picture book, and when he was probably 2 or 3 years old, he would study that book hour after hour, day after day. In fact, I'm going to say that the word excavator was probably among the very first 4-syllable words that my son was able to pronounce as a kid. So this fascination with heavy equipment continued through the bloodline. I remember being a kid and going to the Bobcat Rodeo. How cool was that? Watching skid steers go through an obstacle course and watching their operators run these pieces of equipment with amazing precision and amazing skill. There was even this event that we used to have here in Southeast Wisconsin, where I live, called Dozer Days, where you could take your kids to this gigantic quarry, huge quarry, and you could do all kinds of cool stuff. You could ride around in the bed of a dump truck that looked like this, but was way bigger. This is the one that inspired young kids on the playground as they played with the dump truck. You could literally ride in the bed of a huge quarry dump truck at this event. You could get into a backhoe and with the help of a skilled operator, actually operate the backhoe. So really cool and interesting things happening in the world of heavy equipment, and every single young person and people of all ages absolutely love this technology and love this type of equipment. I cannot to this day drive past a construction site without slowing down to awe at the people who are operating this equipment, the amazing skills, the amazing abilities that they have to do this well, to do it efficiently, and to do it safely. And today, we get to talk with a guest who knows all about this equipment, who knows all about how we prepare people for careers operating heavy equipment, and how we give them the certifications necessary to be successful when they get here. So with that, my pleasure today is to introduce my friend John Havlick. Now, John is a principal associate of Workforce Development Strategies, a construction education consulting firm based in Gainesville, Florida. John has practical experience in the construction trades. He served as an adult education practitioner and previously worked at the National Center for Construction Education and Research, or NCCER, as we will refer to it today, as Senior Manager of Workforce Development. So John, let's start out by welcoming you to the Webinar Wednesday and telling you how much we love having you.
Thank you, Matt. No, I'm happy to be here. It's my pleasure. And I like your cue up. This is great. The little kid in me was starting to come out. So,
well, maybe we'll compete a little bit with each other for the amount of enthusiasm we can put into the discussion. But having met you before, I think that might be a tough bar for me to get over. But let's start here. Let's talk about NCCER and the benefits of the certifications that they offer.
Sure. No, my pleasure. So, as you had mentioned, I worked for NCCER for a good number of years. I actually lived very close to their national headquarters, and NCCER was originally founded by members of the construction industry, leading contractors, trade associations, and academics in the construction training field. And really what we found going back 25, 30 years ago was there was not enough people in the workforce talent pipeline. So NCCER started off with a mission to develop curriculum for all the construction crafts and trades, irregardless of what your labor affiliation may be, union, non-union. The goal was to develop standardized industry-developed training that could be portable and stackable so that individuals could move around throughout the industry and they wouldn't have to be retaking tests or assessments to prove their worth. So this is a system that allows for a registry where you can view individuals' training transcripts and so forth. We have an image here of some of the training credentials issued, certificates of completion, the NCCER wallet card, if you will, along with official transcripts. So very much like an institution of higher education, they track this information and make it available to a future school that a student attends, to a contractor, or to an apprenticeship program. So that's a quick overview of NCCER as an industry education foundation serving the needs of the workforce and of the contractors for talent.
What a great and succinct explanation of what it is that NCCER does, John. And, to your point, just amazing certifications that establish that an individual has certain competencies, in this case, in their ability to operate heavy equipment. Before we get into the whole topic of heavy equipment, I know we'll have people on the webinar today who are interested in what it takes to become an NCCER accredited organization, what that process looks like.
Sure. So just real quick, a quick overview. So NCCER accreditation. So the NCCER accredits organizations, schools, contractors, trade associations, apprenticeships, etc. They accredit those organizations, and individuals earn credentials, certificates, or other types of competency checks, if you will. So with that being said, most of the organizations that are eligible to become accredited are contractors, apprenticeship programs, and community colleges. When we get down into the high school level, and many high schools use these programs, NCCER programs, as feeders into the college system, the high schools unfortunately cannot become accredited on their own. NCCER wants to see sufficient industry engagement with the training partner. Community colleges certainly fit that bill. I just spent an afternoon last week down in Valencia College here in Kissimmee, Florida, where they run a 10-week training program using the NCCER curriculum to help people get quickly trained, get on the equipment, and then turn them over to contractors who can begin to work with them from a very basic level. So essentially, schools, apprenticeship programs, contractors, and even departments of corrections use NCCER as a means for preparing people as they re-enter society.
So schools, apprenticeship programs, contractors, correctional facilities as they help
youth build programs, Job Corps, and other such programs as well. So essentially, it's really about, and ideally, they're going to have a partnership or a linkage to industry. That's what we like to see. We want to make sure that they're getting the guidance from the partners in the workforce development stream.
Got it. So a great long list of different organizations that have the ability to become an NCCER accredited organization. I, by the way, have been to Valencia College.
Have you?
Visit there about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago with some folks from the Midwest as we were looking at best practices, in this case, in advanced manufacturing. So a great institution. We share a relationship or two there, I am sure. So we've talked a little bit in general about NCCER. Now let's kind of move to the topic of the day, which is heavy equipment operation. John, can you tell us what credentials are available for heavy equipment operators?
Sure. More than happy to do that. So as we're talking about NCCER, I'd like to just make this quick, clear distinction. So there's basically two types of credentials that NCCER offers. First is what we would refer to as training credentials. This is teaching people what they need to know in any given craft or trade. So in the case of heavy equipment, NCCER has developed a standardized curriculum. It consists of 3 levels, okay? And those levels, or those books, if you will, more or less correspond to each year of a standardized registered apprenticeship program. So NCCER has enough content to serve and meet the classroom component as required by the Department of Labor. So they're very keen to make sure that they provide sufficient training and it can match up to standardized training in an apprenticeship program. So there's training credentials. And if we go to the next slide real quick, if I could trouble you, we have some images of NCCER books for heavy equipment operations. There's 4 books on this slide, and it's easier to speak to the slide and everyone can hopefully understand this. So in the training curriculum, whether it's in a high school, whether it's in a community college, or wherever it's going on, typically with NCCER, any of their level 1 credentials, so that's usually the introduction to the trade, safety, etc. It also is paired with what they call the NCCER core curriculum. Those two combine to make a HEO level 1 certificate. This is oftentimes what's used in most states for career and technical education as the benchmark for Perkins funding reimbursements. right? So here in Florida, if you do an HEO level 1 and you're in a high school program and a community college program, that's going to get Perkins funding. It's also going to get some state funding that we have here in Florida as well. Then we go into level 2 or level 3. So each one of these books has modules or chapters, and each of those modules or chapters typically will have a written exam, and it will typically have a performance exam. Both of those need to be completed to successfully move on to the next module. You can do them out of order. You can, you don't have to do it in order, but essentially you're doing performance and knowledge-based testing. And so we can get a level 1 certificate, we get level 2 certificate, level 3 certificate. That's the training certificates. In industry itself, NCCER offers what we call journey level assessments. So these are intended for individuals who are already in industry or maybe lack formalized training or credentialing, and it's an opportunity for them to demonstrate their knowledge of that particular trade at the journey level, or to demonstrate their competency on hands-on tasks at the journeyman level. So it's not just doing one task, but it's a series of tasks that a competent journeyman operator should be able to do. So really what we have is we have training credentials, and then we have assessments to basically validate journey level competency.
Now, I know as people are pursuing these credentials and pursuing these assessments, that you have a relationship that's been very, very valuable, and that is your alignment to Simlog and their simulation exercises. We're going to talk a bit about that, and the question that follows this one will actually look at the specific types of trainers and the specific types of equipment that you and Simlog are training people on, that Simlog Solutions train people on. For now, tell us a little bit about your relationship with Simlog, and tell us about how simulators help create a pathway to preparing someone to obtain an NCCER HEO certification.
Sure. So Simlog is a Canadian-based company, and the president, Paul Friedman, I met him years ago when I was at NCCER. He came to our office and spent some time. And Paul's goal was really, he was aware of how widespread NCCER was within the career and technical education field here in the United States, at the secondary and post-secondary and other level, industry level, et cetera. And so Paul said, hey, I have this great simulator that we've developed, this simulator software and components. What can we do to make sure it's the most relevant to the need of industry and training? So Paul has carefully studied all of these books. He's looked at the performance and competencies required. And so he's designed exercises within the simulations to prepare individuals to do just that, to perform this particular exercise for grading, for backfilling, whatever the case might be. Has specifically aligned to these standards. So he knows the curriculum in and out, and it's a great way to train people and getting them ready to get into an actual, onto a piece of machinery, for example, in advance.
Paul Friedman, go ahead.
No, please, no.
Paul Friedman, indeed a visionary, and we have the opportunity to work with Paul and his team quite closely as well. And I know we share a mutual respect for the technology that they've been able to come up with. I'm going to invite you now, John, to talk a little bit about that technology as we put up some examples of some of the simulators that Simlog is using to align to the NCCER credentials and help people along the pathway toward those credentials and assessments.
Sure. No, my pleasure. So here we're looking at an example of a kind of a full operator station, if you will. So we have multiple display screens in the front. We have a rear view screen, as you're seeing there. And this is really just giving you that full immersion experience in doing the HEO. Now, I was just last week when I went to Valencia College that morning, I actually visited one of our correctional facilities, and I spent a little time on the skid steer simulator. And I used to own my own skid steer. I had my own heavy equipment years ago, and so I'm familiar. I've run these pieces quite a bit, and it was actually very realistic, and really just everything, the whole sense of being on the periphery, what you're looking out for, what's behind you, being attentive to the job site. So they really cover that. I've heard lots of compliments on the quality of the graphics in comparison to many other types of simulators. I thought it was super cool, and you really do feel like it. Initially, just getting used to the controls and so forth, but it's very realistic. And what's interesting is what we're really acquiring through simulation is muscle memory. A lot of it. It's really going through these. Most of the HEO performances on a given job site is really repetition. We're doing a lot of repetition. But we want to be careful. We're not banging into the truck. We're not, missing where the dump site is or whatever the case. So this really helps you to do this in a way that's not going to hurt anything. We're not burning fuel, and you can have multiple students going. We can get into more simplistic screen views where it's a little bit more simple, like a tabletop version. which is really cool because you don't have to buy a whole simulator system, but you can simply get some basic, easily available controls, and you can simply have a single monitor. So the correctional facility I was visiting at had a number of smaller interview type rooms where they were able to place 2 side-by-side desktop simulators, ample room for somebody to work next to another person. And so this is some of the, to me, is some of the nice features to the Simlog components.
Without question, as we look at the videos here of a skid steer, an excavator, a bulldozer, a backhoe loader, lots and lots of really industrially applicable, real job site applicable skills that people are learning on these simulators. I'll also tell you, I was never a skid steer operator, but I was a forklift operator for a while, and this goes back some years. And there's also a forklift simulator that we've used from Simlog that I can tell you, because of my experience running the actual equipment, without doubt, it is incredibly realistic. And it's never going to get anybody all the way there. It's not designed to do that, but it's certainly designed to give us a lot of fundamental familiarity. And to your point, the fine motor control skills and the fine skills that are required in order to eventually get into the piece of equipment and be able to operate it and learn in that fashion. So excellent, excellent solutions on that front. I have another question. I think people would look at this, John, and they would say, who's my ideal student? And some folks might say, you mentioned Valencia College. Is this just a technical college or community college type of product, or who would the ideal learners be for a platform like the one we're talking about today?
Sure. So I can think of a number of different extremes as far as the training goes. So I know for a fact, for example, a youth build program or Job Corps, can't remember which one it was, but this was in Pennsylvania, in Western Pennsylvania. And they wanted to basically do heavy equipment training for people involved with the youth build. So if you're familiar with youth build, basically 17 to 24-year-olds, I believe it is, working with these young people, but their need in the local area was determined what they wanted to train on. So there's a lot of highway work going on in the Pittsburgh area. So they wanted to use usually youth builds doing carpentry, maybe masonry, relatively common stuff. But they said, no, we have a need for this. This program can help us. So we're talking about youth development programs are ideal learners for this potentially. Juvenile justice, we have programs that use it for that, as well as high school programs. And we'll talk about one high school in particular that I worked with out of New Jersey at the end of this presentation. As well, it could be people in correctional facilities. Right now, for those of you who maybe touch on corrections, maybe in your job, sometimes community colleges, technical colleges partner with the Department of Corrections. Right now, corrections, people want, the institutions nationally and statewide want to be able to see individuals leave, be trained, be prepared. So corrections is another area, and not to mention then community college programs, whether it's a full-on, maybe a 2-year associate's degree in, say, heavy equipment operations, or whether it's a 10-week training program like I was describing earlier about Valencia College. Essentially, industry, let's not forget about that. This is also a huge need within industry. I've had a chance to travel all over the country, meeting with major leading industrial contractors, commercial contractors, and everywhere we go, everywhere we talk to people, we hear the same things. We can't find people. We can't find people who are trained up. So many of these organizations have just said, we got to take it on ourselves. So I can think of a number of big contractors. They bring their training program to the job site. They've got a trailer, they've got simulators, whatever the case. So they can bring people on after a shift, and you can continue to build your training credentials through NCCER, and then you can move into industry advancements of pay, advancements of responsibility, et cetera. So these are really kind of the ideal groups that can be reached out to.
And really important work. And we think about whether it's a high school student, a student at a community or technical college, a student going through a program within an industrial employer, everything in between, and to your point, corrections and re-entry as well. So just numerous different career opportunities available for people at every single level. And these certifications, this training platform, sounds like it's available to a wide variety of learners. You touched on this next question a little bit in your last answer, John. The truth of the matter is, you said as you go out to these industrial work sites and talk to employers, these are really in-demand careers. Nobody can find qualified people. You're talking about companies and organizations literally bringing the training to the job site to train people while they're working. Tell our audience a little bit about how in demand these career opportunities are across the United States, specific maybe to our audience in the Midwest, and then how does NCCER help prepare people for these in-demand career opportunities?
Sure, sure. So in-demand career opportunities. So just real quick, let's hop up to the high level. So recently I was doing some research in Bureau of Labor Statistics information, and I was comparing some different traditional construction trades and crafts, carpentry, welding, and heavy equipment operators. And so of those three, heavy equipment operators actually have the largest growth area projected out through 2026. Wow. At this point in time, or 2029, one of the two, but going out at least 5 to 6 more years. And everyone who's out driving around and is, going here and there, we're seeing a lot of utility work going on, right? We're upgrading our power grids all around the country. We see a lot of remediation work. We're cleaning up old sites and things of that nature, whether it's an ash pile at a power plant or whatever the case might be. We also see the need just in all of the infrastructure and highway building. I mean, here in Florida, it's just insane the amount of roads that are being built right now and being widened, et cetera. So we have that. We also have it in, it could even be something as simple as agriculture. I'm from Wisconsin, as you know, Matt. And there's farming going on there. The family farms have been shrinking, but we're using more machinery on the farm. We're using the skid steer to clean up. We're using, the backhoe to do some excavating and digging. Farmers tend to be self-reliant. So it makes sense that in many areas, in fact, the program we'll talk about in a moment, it's in a rural part of New Jersey. And that's what was in the inspiration was we have a lot of rural kids. There's so many applications here for heavy equipment usage. So there's a number of opportunities. And when we look more specifically at Wisconsin, as far as the percentage of increase, and this was something I found from the Department of Workforce Development in Wisconsin, was a 13% increase in the demand for heavy equipment operators in Wisconsin. And that's going out another 5 or 6 years at least. So there is no shortage of the need right now. And my suspicion is that even once we get over this high demand, that infrastructure requires ongoing maintenance.
So here in the Midwest, it's a job area that's growing at 13%. Correct. In the next several years, and we already don't have enough people to fill these jobs. So that challenge will become even more acute, and the value of your credentials and the value of Simlog's simulation products even that much greater as time goes on. So huge in-demand career opportunities. Now, you've alluded a couple times to this next question, and I think our final question before we go over to Melissa to see what's coming in from the audience. You mentioned this school, and it's in response to a question that I had is, can you share a specific example of a school that has implemented NCCER certifications and Simlog simulators specifically for HEO for the benefit of their learners?
Sure. Happy to talk to this. So Hunterdon County Polytech up in northern New Jersey. I was contacted by the gentleman who's the instructor. I took this little clip from the website and even has his information on there, Rick Hubert. And so Rick was inspired. Hey, what can we do with the kids? That's something that's different that we need, that has application to our local communities here in Hunterdon County. And his conclusion was, along with his CTE director, was let's do heavy equipment operations. He did a little further research. He said, hey, the NCCER, we need curriculum. Where do we get it? In this case, this is kind of the unique partnerships that evolved out of this. So essentially in New Jersey, which is heavily unionized state as far as labor, they worked with the local union, the local operating engineers 825, to basically help give their blessing to the program. At the same time, typically unions don't have curriculum that they just make freely available out to the marketplace. NCCER does provide that, and that's really the division between, say, unionized training and what NCCER does. They're both used by industry. One is a little bit, there's kind of a division in that regard, but the union was happy to get on board because they're like, we don't have something that's this detailed in the training. And in fact, I can think of another union in Ohio that did this very same thing, almost parallel to what's going on in Hunterdon County. So there's numerous examples of this. So the union was kind of giving a blessing to it. At the same time, the school was going to run this program, and they were going to do the NCCER core curriculum. So go through all the basics of, introduction to the construction and hands and power tools and things like that. Then they went into HEO level 1. So that's for their high school students, but they also have an adult ed component in the evenings and weekends. So they're able to basically make this available to the local community and also act as kind of an apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship feeder into any of the unions. So this is a really neat example, a little bit of foresight. It required some people to come together. They brought on Simlog simulators, and there's a little small picture on the bottom of the screen here, and they're using this all in tandem. using the NCCER curriculum that provides the academic background, and then using the simulators to do some of that muscle memory and to get exposed to some of the different maneuvers and things that you're doing with equipment. And then they actually have real equipment. I would encourage anyone out there who's interested, go check this out. You can just Google it, Hunterdon County Polytech, pull up their website, and they have a whole series of pictures showing the students on actual equipment, on the simulators. So to me, this is a great program and a good example. And I personally went to New Jersey to help with this. We actually met with people from the union, from the Department of Education, and it was a big deal for them actually to bring this on board. And they have. I'll make a little caveat here. NCCER was originally founded by contractors primarily in the south part of the United States, the industrial Gulf Coast, for example, gas and oil industry, petrochemical, and things of that nature. And so NCCER has been over the last 20 plus years expanding its reach and influence around the country. And it is amazing how much it has grown. I think there's over 4,000 training locations that are NCCER accredited or working with accredited organizations. So Hunterdon is a great example of that. And I believe we even have a couple correctional facilities in New Jersey using a similar program in a juvenile justice program.
Hunterdon is just a fantastic example, and it's really one of those where it's good for everyone, right, John? Certainly NCCER gets to put its credentials to work both there and at 4,000 different facilities across the country. Good for Simlog in terms of seeing its simulation products featured there, but most important, good for all the stakeholders. So
that's right.
Great for the students, great for the employers, great for the high school, and great for the community, because as you described, they have access to these training systems, even if they're not students at the high school. So just a really great example, fantastic example of collaboration. Speaking of collaboration, I'm going to bring my colleague, Melissa Martin, back onto the stage, and we're going to find out what questions may have rolled in from our audience. Melissa.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. And to our audience, if you have any questions, you can always continue still to put those in that Q&A box. John, a question here. How long does it take to get through that level 1? Can that be completed in the course of a semester?
So typically, if you go into the NCCER curriculum, if you reference their catalog, et cetera, as I mentioned earlier, they designed the levels to comply with Department of Labor requirements for the time-based or classroom-based component of an apprenticeship, typically 144 hours of recommended instruction. And they break out each chapter or module is broken out and given recommended numbers of hours, usually in, I believe, 2.5-hour increments they are done, because that kind of complies with a typical evening apprenticeship class, for example. Level 1, typically it was a high school program. Usually core could be a semester to a year. You could probably do level 1 in a year, but I wouldn't say any less than that. If you were in the community college, you probably could go through it because you have motivated students and they're there all day long doing just that. So Valencia does the HEO level 1, Valencia College here in Florida. They do it within 10 weeks. So there's kind of a variety of examples. Some schools I know, like for example, the state of Alabama, any career and technical education program in the state, they use NCCER curriculum. That's something they decided at a statewide level. They will typically take a little bit more time going through, but it'll be typically they'll want to get to at least the level 1. Going into level 2 or 3 at a high school is really maybe a little bit of a stretch because the competencies and the requirements get a little more demanding. But that's where it's nice to have the partnership with a community or technical college or a apprenticeship program or a contractor where you can kind of seamlessly walk into level 2 when you're done with your school program. I would say give about a year to do an HEO level 1, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you, John. You know, given our time allotment here, I think we'll turn things over to Matt to wrap up. To any of our attendees, if you have any additional questions on NCCER certifications or Simlog and how those two fit together, again, you can always reach out to us. I will be sending out a recording of this presentation. You can always just reply to that email with further questions. We'd be happy to help you out. Matt?
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. My sincere thanks to my friend, John Havlick. John, what a great discussion we've had today. It's been great having you on, talking all about heavy equipment operation and certifications available to students of all ages as they seek really, really interesting career choices. John, of course, is the Principal Associate of Workforce Development Strategies. We're looking forward to next week's episode of Webinar Wednesday. We're going to continue our every other week series on industrial training. If you haven't been tuning into that, All of those examples are available on a separate folder on our YouTube channel. So take a look at the Lab Midwest YouTube channel for all of these previous examples of Webinar Wednesday, and also the ones related specifically to upskilling the incumbent workforce. So we're going to continue next week on that topic. Our topic is industrial training, mistakes to avoid when choosing an e-learning platform. So until then, thanks so much for being with us this week on Webinar Wednesday. We are here every Wednesday at 2 o'clock Central, and we will see you next week.